Welcome back. Let's take you to this now. Auditor General Tsakani Maluleke says audit outcomes for the 2023-2024 financial year have improved. However, she says a change in posture is needed to achieve clean audits. Maluleke, who briefed Parliament on audit outcomes, said far too many entities get away with not submitting their financial statements, and many submit late. These include South African Airways, the Post Office and the National Student Financial Aid Scheme. Maluleke also noted that the UIF had submitted its financial statements late in the last 5 years, making it difficult to hold it accountable.
First of all, those in the unqualified zone, far too many of them submit some financial statements of poor quality when we begin our audit. And then they rely on the audit process to correct their misstatements. That's all good and well, but it does highlight a risk that financial management practices are not yet stable. And of course, in a world that's becoming more and more unpredictable and more complex, when there is a crisis or a change in the environment during the course of the financial year, if there isn't a discipline of producing quality financial statements on a regular basis, the ability to change course, to make the type of decisions that those who manage institutions must make on a regular basis, the ability to do so is compromised because you don't have the information you require. The ones in this yellow zone, I want to highlight, the outcome is undesirable because financial statements are fine, but financial management practices are weak. And also compliance is a problem. And the ability to report faithfully on performance is compromised. So it is absolutely crucial that the ones in the yellow zone be encouraged to move to the clean audit zone. Some of them, far too many of them, are actually too comfortable in that category. I say this because you'll see that there are 82 of them in that yellow block that have been stagnant in this category, been in this category for the last 5 years, meaning that there's a relative comfort to being unqualified with findings. And so they tend to trivialize the need to move towards the green zone. Amongst those 82, there are a good 36 that have one issue standing between them and a clean audit, which then tells us that it is about a posture and a decision that needs to change around a commitment towards clean audits. There are good 26 entities in the higher education and training portfolio, and I say this because I'm sure the Honourable Chair is listening carefully. In that portfolio, there are 26 entities which fail the audit test and are denied a clean audit simply because they don't submit credible financial statements when the audit begins.
All right, let's expand more on this and now welcome local governance expert, Dr. Harlan Cloete. Dr. Cloete, thank you so much for your time and good afternoon to you. So to what extent do late submissions and in fact no submissions of financial statements undermine financial reporting and essentially make it difficult to hold entities accountable? Also, as you answer that, just how prevalent is this practice given what we've just heard now?
Good afternoon to you and good afternoon to the viewers. When you talk about managing an institution, it all comes down to leadership. So if a municipality, I always talk about municipalities, if a provincial entity does not submit its financial statements, that's simply a dereliction of duty. And so there has to be consequence. I think what the Auditor General have also pointed out, there's a poor consequence culture in many of our state organizations. And if we do not change that around, there will continue to be the bad apples, but the bad apples are never sanctioned and there's never punishment mooted out to these bad apples. And so it's important for clean governance and for good governance that we have institutions submitting their financial statements and subjecting them to the audit criteria of the Auditor General.
That aside, and that said, in the main, the Auditor General did in fact find that the audit outcomes for this financial year 23-24 have improved. A total of 142 entities achieved clean audits. Collectively, these entities manage only 13% of the more than 2 trillion rand expenditure budget of the national and the provincial government. Given the improvement, what should we then be seeing in this current administration under the GNU? I would imagine that the improvement means that there are certain foundations that have been laid here.
I think we said, we keep on repeating it. The problem in South Africa is governance, and oversight. And we've got our governance systems allows for checks and balances. What you also pointed out in a report was, that those high impact auditees, like education, skills development, infrastructure, they continue to perform not so well. And we need a push from that direction. And so we've got these oversight committees, and these committees must ensure that these high impact auditees deliver, because education, for example, if we can just stick with education and infrastructure, those are critical elements. If we do not get the education right, if we do not get the infrastructure right, if we do not spend what we are supposed to spend, if we do not get the governance of these high impact institutions right, it just slows service delivery to the majority of our citizens. And so one hopes, as you pointed it out, 77% of them high impact auditees, that people sitting on boards in parliament that are supposed to do oversight, that they will be tasked to ask the right questions.
Just on that oversight and that accountability role, how important is Parliament's role here in, being able to better monitor, better track progress on those plans that were initially set out, and that it does in fact comply with the PFMA, especially when you consider that there have also been concerns raised on, as you've also mentioned, governance issues and the supply chain management side of things?
No, definitely. I think what the Auditor General also pointed out is the issue of performance management and even financial management. And so performance management means is that we set ourselves targets and then we work towards achieving those targets. And if an institution has targets and an annual performance plan, it submits that thing either to the board or to the parliament or whoever has oversight. Those tasked with oversight must be able to ask the right questions and demand answers. In other words, we do have quarterly performance reviews, and so it's about asking the right questions. And where there is oversight, people that are tasked with oversight should be able to do their work diligently.
And just as we close off, we also heard that of the 142 auditees achieved clean audits, only, I forget the number now, it's around about 60 to 65 have done so consistently over the past 5 years, rather. What are the key takeouts then that should be learned from those particular entities here? Because we did mention earlier on in our introduction that there are those other entities like the South African Post Office, like the SAA, who have not managed to do so consistently.
I think it's about behavior. It's about that culture of no consequence. It's about poor performance management. And it always comes down to leadership. If you've got good leadership, I was in a conversation the other day with the chairperson of ESCOM, and there they shared the lessons learned in turning this around. So state institutions, it comes down to leadership and performance management and the detail. I think the boring part of leadership is management, is that day-to-day check. Are we on track? Are we on track? And so it's a combination of leadership and management in our institutions that will ensure that the dream deferred of 94 is realized. Because if we have poor service delivery, if we've got poor audit outcomes, if we've got a lack of transparency and accountability, the people that ultimately suffer are the poor. And we can ill afford the poor to suffer any longer.
And that leadership does cut across many entities, Dr. Cloete. But where does the buck stop? Who must then make sure that, from an accountability at least, that they do take a leadership where we see consequences?
I think, it comes down to leadership, but to oversight. So the accounting officer in institutions, the buck stops with that person. But the Auditor General also have got extended powers in terms of material irregularities. But I'm saying it's a combination of the accounting officer, the buck stops there, but oversight is just as important. We can't have, we spend millions on oversight bodies, and so the accounting officer is also not a law into his or her own hands. So we need that combination. Governance means checks and balances. And so Parliament, boards of state-owned enterprises, the politicians at the provincial and national level, they are supposed to be equipped and to make sure that these institutions deliver on the promise, because they spend time developing a plan. They need to deliver on this plan and also spend according to this plan. And so it's a combination. Governance is it's messy. It's not in suit and tie, but it is the meticulous detail in check, and making sure that we are on track with our plans.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Dr. Harlan Cloete is a local governance expert just weighing in on this matter.